Well, that was it. The actual last dance. Jill Jelnick and Richard Oliver into, as we've done the last 5 weeks, react to The Last Dance, episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then last night, 9 and 10. Guys, let's get right to it. Jill, your takeaway from episodes 9 and 10.
The other villain in this story. For so long leading up to these final episodes, it was all about Jerry Krause's relationship with Jordan, how he had a toxic relationship with the players, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, also Coach Phil Jackson. It was all about Jerry Krause, and it was hard because he had passed away in 2017. He couldn't defend himself. He was the only person in this entire docuseries that could not defend himself or his actions in the 90s. And then all of a sudden, episodes 9 and 10, the very, very end, so more episode 10, we hear more from the owner, the other Jerry Reinsdorf, and how he said himself he physically didn't think that he could keep the team together financially. He said, quote, it was suicidal to try to put that team together. And we start to hear more of a, well, wait a minute, where has this been all along? I think these 2 episodes shine the most light on that front office and how it wasn't just Jerry Krause, how it wasn't just MJ wanting to go into retirement. It wasn't just Phil Jackson thinking this is the end. It was a cumulative effort of all of those things, which ultimately broke up that dynasty.
You know, what's really interesting, too, is that in those last 2 episodes, I don't know if you guys noticed this, they didn't do a whole lot of off-camera or current day interview with Michael Jordan. It was interesting. We had the story played out without the input, the modern day input of Michael Jordan till the very end. And it was so powerful. I thought the exclamation point of the whole series at the end, where they look back and do the kind of like the tribute to The Last Dance, and then how it all, the whole tenure of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But then at the end, he said it just needed I wanted to do it in Chicago, but it just needed to match to light it, and and all this kind of stuff. I came away with it thinking that, number one, obviously, what a dynasty, what a story. 6 out of 8 years could have been 8 out of 8 years if he didn't have the detour that he had for whatever reason to play baseball. But you look at those kind of different things, and I think it was just so remarkable at the very end, Hector, that what a miserable man. He's just miserable. I just think this is something that, you could have gone, there's 2 ways to look at this. This 6 championships in 8 years in sports, we know how difficult that is. But on the other side, it was just painted as this miserable journey, this grind, this just look at all we sacrificed and all the different things going on around us that made this so difficult. And instead of, this should have been like this most joyous thing that we celebrate, but I didn't come away with a sense of celebration. I don't know. I found that so compelling. Of course, that's what makes it a good documentary. If it was all sunshine and rainbows, and look at the Spurs and how great they are, and we all want to bring them home for dinner all the time, that's one thing. These Bulls, I don't want Dennis Rodman anymore. You have to wear a hazmat suit around that guy. So I don't know. That's one of those things that I just think it was just so interesting to me how it all wrapped up.
2 things come to mind that take away. One of them is similar to what Jill mentioned, but I kind of look at it from the other side. And this kind of sounds silly considering we work in sports, but it almost speaks to how caught up we were in Jordan and the run. When Reinsdorf is sitting there and talking about, look, we couldn't continue this because we also wanted to build for the future. And that's what Krause had in the back of his mind. Like, yes, he was a scheming villain, and that's how he was portrayed, but he also was kind of trying to look to the future. At some point, they had to transition to life after Mike. And I think that's what this was all about. And to hear Jerry Reinsdorf at the end saying, what were we supposed to do? Give Ron Harper a 4-year contract when he was at the end? Scottie Pippen really wanted that money that he owed. Were we going to break the bank for, an older Scottie Pippen? Do you keep guys like Luke Longley, Steve Kerr, Scott Burrell, spares, to put it, not being kind, but kind of to use a term of our day in sports? Do you keep that collection together and continue to sacrifice for the future? Because there was no building block with MJ there with whom they could continue to move forward. So it kind of brings in the whole management element of, oh yeah, like these guys aren't just thinking of today. It was MJ's job to think of today, but these guys had to think of beyond. So yes, Jerry Krause wanting to break this thing up from conceivably the get-go seems silly, but there was also this element of you do have to think forward so that you're not the 80s Celtics who just basically went like this and then weren't the same, and then Boston never saw success again really until, you know, KG, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen got there in the mid-2000s. So there was that element to it. That hit me, that went, oh yeah, executives have to kind of make those executive decisions. There is that element to this thing. The other thing is the food poisoning game. All right, maybe it's just me, and I touched on last week about how were they going to get into the rumors about how he was hungover and didn't have the flu. So we know he didn't have the flu, and I had heard the food poisoning thing before. Like his trainer Tim Grover, I think, did an interview on it 2013. But am I the only one who took that kind of as a fishy story? Like there's only one restaurant open in all of Park City, Utah. 5 guys show up. So, like, they knew they were making a pizza for Michael Jordan. His 2 friends see that these 2 guys probably know it's for MJ, which, how do you know? But from a pizza delivery standpoint. But anyway, his 2 of his best friends and guardians know that there's just some suspicious activity, and they still allow him to eat the pizza. And, oh, by the way, he's the only one that eats an entire pizza. Like, it was just kind of like, okay. Like, it just seemed a little contrived. It just seemed, I mean, I don't know. Did MJ get his buddies in a room and say, this is the story that we're going to tell from here on out? Like, I don't know. I'm not going to go that far. It just seemed a little off to be like, that was the explanation for, I don't know. I think
there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. I mean, you know, it's just like heading off to Atlantic City, you know, before one playoff game and all those kind of different kind of things. Now, look, I know I'm speaking as the Luke Longley of our group, but I'm one of the. But you know, I think what we're looking at when we think about this, and I know that's what made this so compelling, was that there's so much behind the scenes with Michael Jordan. He's notorious in a way. You know, that's why instead of being just famous, he's infamous, because I just think there's so much to that. And of course, the whole series, the whole story is about sacrifice and just what do you have to sacrifice personally to succeed professionally sometimes, you know, and especially in his case, how he could be such an ass and he could be all these different things. But players now look back on him, and it reminds me a little bit of how we know stories like this of people that we've worked with who have pushed us, who now in retrospect we look back and I remember that Jimbo Elliott, who played for the Giants under Bill Parcells, who hated him. They got in a fight in practice, rolling down a berm, you know, just wrestling with each other and everything. And then he ended up signing with Parcells again with the Jets, saying you don't realize till after you're away from somebody like that, yeah, he's a jerk and you're not going to like him and you're not going to run around with him after you retire, but he makes you better. And you've won championships because of that guy. And you could see that at the end with Michael Jordan. So all the little things, infamous things that happened with him around the story were just part and parcel of the bigger picture.
Right. Jalen Rose has said, you know, hey, I heard he was hungover, and there's been other voices in the NBA that have said a trip to Vegas wasn't out of the possibility. They were in Utah, you know, an overnight trip to Vegas, whatever it was. It just, the story just seemed like, okay, you know, we move on. All right. So things you didn't know that you learned out of episodes 9 and 10, Richard.
Well, the thing I didn't know, I don't know why it didn't occur to me to think of the relationship between Steve Kerr's situation and Michael Jordan's situation. I don't know, and that they never talked about that. I thought that that's something, as someone whose father was died when I was young and was killed in an air show crash. So I had lost my dad. So when Michael Jordan told the story of losing his dad, obviously it affected me. You know, it just kind of affected me at a banal level. And I think that that's one of the things Steve Kerr talked about it, which that just tore me up. That's that part of that segment, how it's still so emotional for Steve Kerr, how it just tore me up. But I found that very interesting that they could not connect at an emotional level enough to sit down and have a conversation. They had not talked about the fact your dad died in gunfire. My dad died in gunfire. I just found that very interesting. And Jill, I don't know about you, but that was the one thing that kind of just didn't seem all that. That told a story for me that would really hit me personally.
It was a very powerful moment when Steve Kerr was telling the story of his father. It almost felt like that whole section, that whole part of that episode could have been taken out and had its own documentary and just kind of dove in deeper between the relationship of Michael and Steve Kerr with their fathers. It was so powerful and it stood out. So I agree with you completely on that. The other part that I didn't know that I loved was Phil Jackson's ritual of the final burning of their last messages with the team. Up until this point, this docuseries has painted this picture of Phil Jackson as this Zen master, this guru, this all-powerful, all-knowing, very intelligent coach, but also individual that the players look to so much and put on a pedestal. And I thought it was so powerful that despite all the rumors, despite the questions, can we bring Phil back? Michael Jordan will only play if coach comes back. He was so content with this is the last dance. He was the one that coined that term from the beginning. And to bring that team together and have that special moment with the burning of the message, it was the closure Coach Jackson was looking for, and I think many of the players were hoping for as well. I had no idea about that. I thought that was another powerful moment as well.
I had forgotten about the Rodman thing with Hulk Hogan happening in the midst of the final. Now complete, episodes 1 to 10. What did The Last Dance and a look at this Bulls run and one of the greatest runs in sports history and when maybe the most dominant team athlete in sports history, what do you take away from the totality of these 10 episodes, Jill?
The price of success, the price of being the greatest player of all time. And with greatness comes great sacrifice. It has been the main theme from episode 1 all the way until last night's final episode. Jordan's struggle, his internal struggle with being accepted and liked as a person versus the competitive, natural athlete that he is, those two conflicting personalities, and how sometimes you can't find that balance. For him, if he wanted to be the greatest player of all time, he had to sacrifice X, Y, and Z, and he had to take on a mental mindset that very few athletes are able to tap into in their entire careers. To take it one step further, I hope that young athletes, kids, teenagers, college athletes, or even current professional athletes, I hope they look at that struggle and see how difficult it is to find balance, but also use that as motivation to try to practice a lifestyle and lead a life that is positive for them, that is the best for them. Jordan tried to do what was best for him, and in many people's eyes, it seemed so outlandish, ridiculous, so difficult. But that was the life he chose. I hope athletes moving forward look at this and make their own decisions and practice what is best for them to lead the life they want to lead, even if it does require sacrifice, even if it does require X, Y, and Z. That was my takeaway.
Joe, I think that's wonderful. And I tell you, and Hector, I've got two things actually, and quickly. One is I work at my office. There's a lot of the whippersnappers around me, like Jill, who, I walk in and talk about Paul McCartney, and they don't know about this little band called the Beatles that Paul McCartney was a part of, or they think Monty Python is a guy. It's so. I was happy that my son and some different people from that era, Jill, I'm just kidding you because you're so steeped in sports, you know exactly who Michael Jordan was. But I'm glad they got to see Michael Jordan. I think there's a lot of people that got to see, hey, this guy was good. This guy was great. And I've talked about time and time again, look, you could, and Sean Elliott talked about it a little bit earlier this week about the idea that we could talk about LeBron James all day long. And he said every time we've had arguments in our circle about who's the best player in NBA history, I always say, take out Michael from the conversation. Let's talk about everybody else.
Right.
And that's how Michael Jordan ranks in this whole thing. I was glad there was an audience out there that got to see who this guy was. And we all know how just luminescent this guy is as a player. So I was glad to see that. But the other thing was a sense of incompleteness. I'm not sure if that's a word, but a sense that there was so much more that could have happened. As unbelievable as 6 out of 8 years winning championships was, if Jordan hadn't left, oh my gosh, this could have been 8 consecutive years, really. I mean, that's the great thing about sports. You could have that debate. But also at the end of it, to go for the four-peat, to be able to bring them all back for one more year of trying for a four-peat, something that just, in sports is just unbelievable. But I felt like I walked away just feeling a sense of that there was stuff that still could have been done. As unbelievable as that sounds, 6 championships, Hector, but still you think that they didn't do as much as they could have done. And that's astounding to me when I think about it.
Especially around here, right? When you talk about the next year specifically with 99,
Oh yeah, that's right.
That would have been really fun to see. Like how the Bulls would have had no answer for Timmy. At the same time, it's Mike. Like it's Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
My takeaway is very similar to Jill's. First though, I think MJ took a hit. This to me, this did, and it's interesting because I guess this answer mixes both your takeaways. To me, this did nothing to enhance Mike, because those of us who followed him and heard the stories and have since seen the legend grow, we didn't see anything that we didn't already know. We knew about that voracious competitiveness. We knew about how talented he was. We knew about all the titles, the stats, everything that came along with it. So we got to relive it, but we didn't really get a sense of any more of the dominance, if you will. What he did will stand the test of time. So that didn't grow. But what did grow was how much his teammates didn't like him and how brutal he was to his own teammates. And I think when Timmy retired, some folks said he's the greatest teammate who ever played, right? I don't think anyone's ever going to be able to say that about MJ. Now, you can say he's the greatest teammate in the fact that all these other guys wouldn't have won anything if it wasn't for him. But in terms of everything that encompasses a teammate, I think that took a hit. To what Jill was, and that relates to what Jill was talking about, is I really am curious to see what comes out of this in terms of leadership norms going forward, because the common belief is that there are other ways to be successful and to be decent, right? Tim Duncan won 5 championships, Magic won 5 championships, Kareem won 5, Bill Russell, those 60 Celtics, was it 11 that they ended up with? Or 8 and 11?
11 out of 13.
Yeah, 11 out of 13. My point is, you can win nearly that much, or in Russell's case, although Russell's a little bit different because he was he didn't have the best reputation teammate, kind of like MJ does, although his was for much different reasons and a much different era. The point being, Magic, Tim will probably tell you, yeah, we won a lot and we didn't have to be that way. But here's the thing at the end of the day. Neither of those two guys is Michael Jordan. Neither of those two guys won their titles in an 8-year span and are regarded as probably, outside of the young LeBron fans, the consensus greatest basketball player who ever lived, and maybe the greatest athlete who ever lived, period. So is there something to be said for that's why he's up here and everybody else is down here, because he was able to get to that level personally with his teammates that many aren't comfortable getting to? Is that the defining quality? We don't know, because Michael Jordan doesn't have a peer. So you can go on and say, you don't have to be like that to win. You can be like Tim, you can be like Magic, but at the same time, or you can be like Tom Brady in football, or some of the baseball guys who won a lot, Jeter. But none of those guys are Michael Jordan. And at the end of the day, is that what separated him? And is that really a great thing? Because those around him in the moment, we saw it. We saw it play out, how badly he treated Scott Burrell during that. Boy, I mean, Scott Burrell was his whipping. Did he have to do that? Did he have to go that far? And I think that's something that to me is going to resonate going forward, is how people take cues in terms of leadership going forward, especially when they're not the coach. Easy to forget, right. He was a player alongside. he has no contemporary, but he was a player. He wasn't the coach. I don't know if either one of you guys wants to chime in on that before we go.
Yeah, I wonder if, when you look back at the NBA during that stretch, I wonder if that was the stretch when, and Jill, you and I have talked about this, the idea that players now rule the NBA. And you saw it, even in some of those clips, Hector, of Jordan in the huddle and Phil Jackson saying something, Jordan saying, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, and he'd do something else, So I wonder if that's when we saw that evolution, that change from the coaches and and owners ruling things to players kind of ruling the NBA.
Yeah, to that point, and Richard and Joe, I don't know if you were going to jump in. Apologies. To that point, think about it. If LeBron says to which coach nowadays, I'm not switching. I'm chasing through that screen and I'm going to stay with him. If LeBron does it, oh, look at him, thinks bigger than the game. MJ does it, and it's an example of great leadership. He knows what needs to get done. So we give him a pass, and rightfully so, for the on-the-court stuff because of the legend. I just think that this documentary peeled back the onion, that this guy wasn't a pleasant guy. And to your point, Richard, he was miserable half the time because he was so singularly focused on winning, and only when he won did he relax and enjoy. And then after he won, and he enjoyed it for a couple of days, he lived in the moment, as he said. It was right back to being the tyrants that he kind of alluded to in episode 8. You might say, I'm a tyrant. Okay, but that's because you didn't win anything. A lot of people have won, and won a lot, using a different method. Nobody's won at that level. And to me, that is the conundrum of maybe the paradox that is Michael Jordan and everything that encompasses him as a three-dimensional human being. Guys, it's been awesome to be able to do this the last 5 weeks.
No, it's been fun. I just getting a chance to experience the 80s again in a different way, the way I like to experience them, not the music, but the basketball.
Yeah. No, it's been a blast. I think what I'm going to miss is just Sunday nights, knowing that I was watching this powerful, awesome sports documentary, being a part of sports history, but with, millions of people tuning in at the same time because of this pandemic. So I think another big takeaway real quick is just the fact that a story on television, sports history, could bring so many people together in such a crazy critical time. I love that aspect of it, and being able to discuss with you guys, but also knowing that there's sports fans across the entire country tuning in, watching MJ's story right now.
All right,
Yeah,
The Last Dance, and now we wait for the next great documentary. Who knows when it's going to come, and who knows on whom, but The Last Dance, the last 5 weeks complete, now episodes 1 through 10.